the panel, Preventing the Preventable. That is the main aim for our discussion today. And we have an excellent panel by our moderators, Dr. Jyoti Bhaskar ma'am and Dr. Vandana Gupta ma'am. And we have esteemed panelists with us, Dr. Archana Pathak, Dr. Raj Bukharia, Dr. Suman Lal, Dr. Renu Tanwar, and Dr. Seema Gupta, and Dr. Shweta Sardana. Dr. Jyoti Bhaskar ma'am is a president of East Delhi Gynae Forum. And Dr. Vandana Gupta ma'am is a vice president of the East Delhi Gynae Forum. And Dr. Archana Pathak ma'am is a senior.
Meenakshi, we can't see your screen. We can't see your screen. PPTs of the introduction. I think Meenakshi's gone off somewhere. Are you there, Meenakshi? So I think somewhere, I don't know, net must have gone off. So she's on there. So we all know our panelists. They're extremely, I think we all have together is going to really make this particular panel discussion very meaningful. And with that, I'm going to just start off with the panel so that we won't waste much time. And we are going to be talking about something called the Preventing the Preventable Preterms. As Madam and Dr. Ela both very rightfully said, that aim over here is to prevent the preterm birth, because what has largely, if you really look at it, over the period of time, the survival of preterms has improved because of use of antenatal steroids, improvement in neonatal resuscitation, and introduction of neonatal intensive care units. But the to prevent the preterm has largely been unsuccessful. So this is where our focus is going to be. And if we actually what is the single most important risk factor for a preterm birth? It is a previous, prior, spontaneous, unexplained preterm delivery. So our main focus in the first case is going to stop this unexplained preterm delivery in the first pregnancy. So with that, we go on to the panel discussion. I'm going to be taking the first cases, and after that, we have devised a sort of a rapid fire round which Dr. Vandana is going to take, where we are going to discuss our clinical practice. So this is for Dr. Seema. She's Priya, a 30-year-old primary gravida. She comes to us for a first visit. She's 17 weeks pregnant. And as I already said, we all know it is very important to prevent a preterm in the very first delivery, because that is the most important factor. So when she comes to you at the first visit, what are the specific risk factors that you're going to elicit in her history to be able to identify whether this girl is at increased risk of preterm delivery in this pregnancy? So Dr. Seema, for you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, ma'am, for inviting me and involving me in this panel. In this patient, she's a 30-year-old primary gravida. So though she's asymptomatic, but since we are living in a country where we have a high incidence of preterm delivery, so we have to ask the history which might lead to preterm delivery in this pregnancy. Ask specifically for any history of infections that she might be having, any history of urinary tract infection, any history of cervical infections, especially the periodontal infections. Gingival infections are also prone to lead to preterm delivery. Plus, any history of smoking or any alcohol use, any history of drug abuse. All these are factors which are high risk for developing a preterm birth. So definitely we have to elicit such history and treat accordingly if we have some positive history of such sort.
So very rightly said, Dr. Seema. So there are two factors. One is non-modifiable and one is modifiable. Non-modifiable is not in her hands. If she's a young girl, less than 18, more than 40, if she belongs to a black race, she belongs to low socioeconomic status, less BMI, uterine anomaly. So we need to take a lot of histories as well as uterine anomalies. Any previous cervical have been done, because that also tends to increase her risk of having preterm birth in this particular pregnancy. And of course, multiple pregnancies. But it's the modifiable which is very important, because we can actually make a difference in this particular modifiable. So this is the latest one of the charts which was there in 2017, where they have looked at various modifiable factors. And do we have any intervention for these particular modifiable factors? So of course, we know cocaine, tobacco, yes, we can ask her to stop. Infections of urinary tract infections, intrauterine infections, yes, we can treat the particular one. But the fact that really struck me were two things. One is bacterial vaginosis, where we know it's a modifiable factor, but they say there's no intervention to modify it. And the second factor is the periodontal. We always believe that the gingival infections or periodontal need to be treated. They can be changed, but they say that there is, particularly the interventions does not have an effect upon the preterm birth. So with this, we need to make a work along with the stress that she has. We need to change those particular factors, any physical work that she has. These are modifiable factors. Main focus lies to really identify the modifiable risk factors, correct them if possible in this pregnancy so that at least they are not a cause of preterm birth. So coming to you, Dr. Renu, you have ruled out all the significant risk factors by taking an extremely detailed history despite sitting in a government hospital with the OPT. And you find out that this girl is smoking and you have told her that, yes, you need to stop off the breedy smoking, which she has voluntarily agreed, and I hope she sticks to it. So are there any specifications, I mean very specific for the preterm delivery, that you would advise to assess her risk of preterm delivery, even though you know that she's at very low risk? So Dr. Renu, for you. I am not able to see. Dr. Renu, are you there?
Ma'am, please unmute yourself. Dr. Renu, ma'am.
Is it okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yeah, now this patient is a low risk, Dr. Jyoti, and definitely all those high risk, the history taking has been taken care of. And I think so the only thing which can we do, because the investigations will depend what complaints she has. Now, since she has no complaints, I think the best we can do for this low risk patient is we can do a cervical length screening for her. And she is already in the 17 weeks, you said. So somewhere in the level 2 ultrasound scan, we can do a cervical length screening for this patient. Ideally, all the guidelines do not recommend a universal screening for these low-risk patients. But yes, EGO says you can do it in low-risk patients, but then you should combine it with the level 2 scan. So I think so that's the best thing you can do for this patient.
So Dr. Renu, any specific way that we should do the cervical screening? Do you have any specific recommendations by the SMF or by ISOG about, so that everyone over here can know exactly what we need to ask our radiologists, what type of a cervical and screening method they should do?
I think it should be a transvaginal scan where you're taking the whole length of the cervix from the internal os to the external os, and the diameter should be more than 2.5 centimeters. I think so. This is the best. Even transabdominal.
So are you?
Where the length, they say if it is 3.5, it is good enough.
So in your hospital, are you using universal screening for all patients, or
No.
it's only the high risk?
Only the high risk patients.
So let's look at what the data says now. So this is from the SMFM guidelines 2016. It says that the mid-trimester cervical length by transvaginal ultrasound is the best clinical predictor of spontaneous rebirth. The finding of a short CL, irrespective of previous pregnancy, has been consistently reasonably associated with elevated risk of spontaneous PTB. Now, the question is, which period of gestation? So, Dr. Renu, why do we say 16 to 24 weeks? Any particular reason that we have kept it as 16 to 24 weeks to do
even at that time, we'll do a level 2 scan for these patients, maybe, and then even if you want to put a stitch, if you find it, I think that's the ideal time where you can do that.
Yeah.
So
they say before 16 weeks, actually the lower uterine segment is underdeveloped and it all becomes a part of endocervical, so assessment is not correct. And you rightly said that after 24 weeks, they do not recommend because then interventions are not really available. So the ideal time is between 16 to 24 weeks when we should ask, and that is rightfully at the anatomy scan. Now, this is where it says the transvaginal is the best method, and what we should also ensure is that the bladder is emptied. We put in a transvaginal probe, and I've seen Dr. Jyoti Agarwal do it with all her patients, and that is how I felt that this is something that is to be the way it's done, and it has been further supported by all the guidelines. And both the internal and external also should be seen very clearly. We need to measure the cervical length in one go. It should be straight lines. It should not be a curvilinear line. Repeat this process twice to obtain 3 sets of images and use the shortest best measurement. If you have a look at the upper film we see over here, that's the cervical length we are measuring. That's from this one and the end. So when we come to the question of funneling, so would anyone like to take Dr. Raj? What do you think about the funneling? Is the funneling very significant? If they write there's a small funneling or internal loss open by 8 millimeter, do you think that has a significance if your cervical length is normal of 30 millimeters?
Can you repeat it?
If I have a normal cervical length of 30 millimeters and I have given an ultrasound findings that internal os is open to 4 millimeters, your cervical length is 32 millimeters, do you think it is significant?
Yes, it is definitely significant because now it is 4 millimeter, you said the diameter. Now it can progress to 5 millimeter, and that is again signifies the chances of her incompetence or and shortening of the cervix has to be measured serially. Whatever we say, the V shape, the U shape, funneling of the cervix is also a predictor for the preterm labor.
So yes, definitely, I do agree with our experience. We always took funneling also as a point, but the guidelines have said that funneling in the absence of a short cervix is not considered to be a predictor of the preterm birth. We need to follow these patients. Definitely, we need to follow these patients up. But immediately, we do not say that they're going to be at high risk. And many times we get that echogenic sludge that we see it over here, that when you get this particular echogenic sludge, they say, yes, if this sludge is present, it tends to increase the risk of preterm birth, but you do not need to give an antibiotic for this particular case. And the next question is universal or risk-based. So here we have our esteemed panelists. I would like to ask Dr. Seema, do you recommend a universal screening or it is only a risk-based screening for cervical length?
And I would like to have a universal screening.
Okay, and Dr. Raj, do you offer a universal screening or a risk-based?
Yes, I advise to all the patients, and I recommend as the other society, especially during the second trimester scan, anomaly scan, everyone, at least we should, as an obstetrician, should mention and ask for it. Okay, what is their cervical length of the patient? Because it's not necessary that there is always a high risk factor. If she is a primary, we have to follow up if she comes into the high risk group.
Yeah, and Dr. Suman, what about you? Do you also recommend a universal screening?
Generally, I say my radiologists to do EVS at least for the patient when they are doing labor transfer, so that at least we will know. Because in trans-abdominal scan, so many times we miss the cervical range properly. Therefore, I always say that it's better to do one if the placenta is not go and they can do the TVS, so better to do the TVS.
So the question about
before I leave the meeting, I just want to tell this 16 to 24 screening is must. I think this is the factor which is going to pick up the cases. And you have seen Dr. Jyoti Agarwal doing it. And because we see high risk patients, otherwise also 2/3 of the preterm birth come from the low risk category. So one should make a universal policy about the same.
Yeah, very rightly.
And sometimes, and you can find there is a rim of amniotic fluid is there in the cervical canal. That's also a risk factor.
Yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am. I think it has been underlined, although when we look at the various guidelines, they say it's still an object of debate. It cannot yet be universally mandated, but the SFM clearly says practitioners who decide to implement universal screening should follow the strict guidelines. So they have said that if you can follow the strict guidelines, as they had said that it has to be a transvaginal scan, it has to be with an empty bladder, the picture has to fill 75% of your screen, the length has to be taken shortest possible. If you can fulfill these criteria, you're very well trained. Please ask for a transvaginal scan universally for every patient at risk or no risk between 16 to 24 weeks of pregnancy. Now, and this has been suggested because if we have an effective intervention. If we do find a less length, we can intervene and that can prevent the birth. And the accepted definition of short cervix is less than 2.5 centimeter at a mid-trimester pregnancy. Coming to the various recommendations, I think we'll go on to later on today. So we are now coming on to Dr. Suman. This is for you. We did an anomaly scan and your radiologist was extremely good. He did a transvaginal scan as per your recommendation. And they found that the cervical length was just 24 millimeters. He's scared left and right. And he said, you need to just rush and reach your gynecologist and obstetrician.
Actually,
And now she's sitting in front of you. And
Yeah.
I would like to know what is your management
the
plan?
patient is priming, low risk, and 17 weeks is just find out this cervical length is 2.4 centimeter. And patient is really scared. The first important thing is the positive counseling. This positive counseling, generally we say that, okay, your cervical length seems to be little low, a little short, but it is borderline. And most of the people are having the shortened cervix, but they don't dilate. And even it is good your radiologist has sent to you early so that we can have lots of treatment plan for you, and you may not land up in preterm labor. That really make her comfortable. Then I will like to talk to my radiologist. She has done proper measurement or not. If she is satisfied with the measurement, she thinks that it is 2.4. Then we discuss about the treatment plan. In the treatment plan, generally, we discuss about the progesterone, not the cervical circulars in first go with the one ultrasound. We start generally vaginal progesterone, 200 milligram, and gel. As per recommendation, I never use gel, but some people are using gel. They can use the gel. But I don't leave my patient at that time to, okay, you go home and use the progesterone. Don't come to me. Come after 4 weeks. Typically, I like to repeat my ultrasound again, because so many times we have seen the priming after 3 days, after 4 days, they really dilate. But therefore, I say that go for rest, and if you have the pressure symptoms, go for immediate ultrasound. If you are not having the pressure symptom, but still will go for serial ultrasound 1 or 2 twice. If we see that cervix is 2.4 only, then we will not go for circular, but sometimes we see that some dilatation or something, we go for circular.
So for you, according to you, vaginal progesterone is the one that is most recommended, and that is what all the guidelines to say. RCG is also very clear. Ultrasound indicated cervical circulage is not recommended. 17-hydroxyprogesterone in this pain is not an option. The option for her, the best at present, is a vaginal progesterone. You see what the evidence is there in support: more than 35% reduction in the rate of preterm, a significantly lower rate of respiratory distress, to the NICU admissions, fewer neonates with birth weight, and this has been seen by multiple analysis from the Optimum 2016, Foresca 2007, Hassan 2011. That means it is undisputed that if the first time a patient who does not have any previous history of spontaneous birth I just covers the first aspect when we get a primary gravida who's a low risk but who has a short, and we're trying to prevent the first preterm. Now we move on to the next case. Suman, she's a 32-year-old gravida 2, one live issue, that is who's 4 years old. On taking a detailed obstetrical history, we find that she's had a preterm delivery at 34 weeks in the last pregnancy. She had PPRO, and after 4 days, she delivered a baby, which is 2.1 kg, which is not bad for a 34 weeks. And baby was admitted in NICU for 2 weeks, though the baby was perfectly fine and as well with good milestones as of today. Today, she's only 12 weeks pregnant, and she had harrowing time about 4 years back with that baby. And she's come to you saying that at all costs, I do not want a preterm delivery. So, Dr. Shweta, what specific investigations would you like to conduct in her to be able to identify any modifiable risk factor which you could alter and change in this pregnancy?
Good afternoon. So she's already a very high-risk patient for delivering another preterm birth this time, because she has 2 existing risk factors, that being a preterm birth in a previous pregnancy associated with a PPROM. So I would like to rule out other causes that can lead to another mishappen this time, and they would be mostly infectious causes. So I would like to rule out a urinary tract infection for her. I would like to order a urine routine and urine culture for her, as well as I would like to rule out various genital tract infections for her. So I would order for a high vaginal swab and rule out any evidence of chlamydia, gonorrhea, trichomonas, and bacterial vaginosis. Apart from this, I would also like to check her BP, her sugar, and her hemoglobin, so that at least anemia and sugars and BP can be controlled.
So very rightfully said, because we're just talking about very specific. So we're talking of screening for bacterial vaginosis, for urinary tract infections, and an intervention of cervical length is 16 weeks. So Dr. Shweta, for you, this question. For bacterial vaginosis, in an asymptomatic patient, would you recommend, or would the guidelines at present recommend screening for bacterial vaginosis in a patient who is high risk, asymptomatic?
At present, the guidelines don't suggest that we should screen for bacterial vaginosis in an asymptomatic patient, especially because, if we are giving a treatment, then there is the perinatal mortality, or it is not benefiting the baby. So for asymptomatic people, we are not offering a routine screening. But if she's come to me with a vaginal discharge, a foul-smelling pathological discharge, then yes, I would like to do a vaginal spot for her.
That's very rightfully said, because I always felt, and I used to do a bacterial vaginosis screening for this patient, but after looking at this particular guidelines, I think we will probably revisit our practice and see whether that makes a difference or not. So it's ACOG, CDC, AAFP, or plus the US PSTF, all have recommended in asymptomatic, low risk or a high risk. At present, there's not sufficient evidence to say that you get more benefits by screening for a bacterial vaginosis. But if she is a symptomatic patient, Dr. Shweta, if she's a symptomatic patient, so the treatment that they have said, yes, you need to treat the particular patient. But this is something from the ASOGC guidelines that I did pick up, that if she's a low-risk patient and symptomatic, it can be either oral or a vaginal tablet can be effective. But if this particular patient is a high risk, they say the topical treatment, the vaginal treatment is not recommended. It has to be an oral treatment with metronidazole 500 milligram twice daily for 7 days, or clindamycin 300 milligram twice daily for 7 days. So if a patient like this one is a high risk and she's symptomatic, we do find bacterial vaginosis, it's going to be an oral treatment with metronidazole, or it's going to be with clindamycin. And the testing should be repeated 1 month after treatment to ensure that the treatment is complete. So coming to the next aspect that we were talking about, and that is the asymptomatic bacillus that we know as a cause of preterm. So Dr. Raj, I get you inside over here. So what is the diagnostic test? How do you treat and how do you follow up the patients with ABU?
The diagnostic test for ABU, that is the urine infection, is doing the urine culture. Standard to pick up the quantitative level of the growth of the bacterial pathogen, uropathogen, and which should be more than 10 to the power 5 per CFU, that is the colony forming unit per ml. And in the catheterized sample, it can be less, but usually we don't go for that. And because in pregnancy, that will increase the chances of the infection again, which can predispose further for the preterm birth. Now, it should be universally, as said earlier, every patient, whether it is a primary or multi or at a high risk, should be screened for the asymptomatic bacteriuria. Now, after the diagnosis, and it is very important how the urine culture sample is given to catch up the infection. Because if you don't put it a clean catch midstream urine, and which should not be kept in the room temperature, it should be kept at 4 degrees centigrade. Otherwise, it will have a mixed growth of the bacteria, which will be more or less, and the report will not be right. Now, another thing is if the sample is showing the midstream sample is showing less than 10 to the power 5, and it is showing the mix, then we think it is a contaminated, and we have to repeat it again to confirm the diagnosis of the urine infection. But this is a little expensive method. Other method which we can go in the low resources is the urine routine, in which if there is a presence of leukocyte esterase or the nitrite, that will indicate the presence of the urine infection, even in the absence of the any symptoms. Now, the another one method is the dipstick method for the nitrite and the leukocyte strain. Sometimes the leukocyte strain may not be important, may not be showing any positive finding if the pyuria is less. And the second thing is if sometimes, though I'm not doing it and I don't think anyone is doing it, the gram staining for the gram
No.
positive and negative bacilli.
Yeah.
The gold standard remains in the
Culture.
can be afforded. The cost factor is there. Urine culture. Otherwise, urine
Yes.
routine by the dipstick method can also be taken, which can be further added and confirmed with the sensitivity for the infection.
Yeah. So, very rightly said, but in pregnancy, they normally say that you should take 2 samples. But again, being not very cost effective and as well as patient compliance, it's now recommended a single urine culture sample taken between 12 to
Is
16
anyone
weeks.
doing a double sample?
No, no one is doing a double sample. I'm not doing. And
I don't think anyone is doing.
so they have recommended a single sample is good enough. It may be repeated. If the first sample is negative and a patient is at high risk, they say you may repeat the particular sample. So the next question that I want to ask you itself is about this is what is the antibiotics that you're going to be using? What is the treatment? What is the antibiotics that you recommend?
Usually the antibiotic treatment depends upon the according to the sensitivity
Culture.
report.
Yeah, culture and sensitivity.
Yeah, according to the sensitivity, and there are various antibiotics which are preferred apart, not the all antibiotics like the cephalosporin, nitrofurantoin, the trimethoprim and sulfamethoxazole and fosfomycin. And there are reported different societies are reporting 1 day course or the 3 day course,
Yes.
depending, especially in the asymptomatic AUB. But usually what I do according to the sensitivity, I prefer to give the 7 day course of the antibiotic to have the complete cure and to prevent the recurrence.
Yes. So very rightfully, yeah. Yes, again.
1 day course of antibiotic doesn't cure the symptoms totally, and the recurrence rate is very high.
So the drugs that are recommended in pregnancy, nitrofurantoin, fosfomycin, or we have the cefuroximine, either of them can be used. Previously, we did say, but it's the latest guidelines of IDSA and EAU, which says that a standard course of 2 to 7 days should be used to treat and not a single dose. They found that with the single dose, the chances of preterm birth is much more and repeat infections is much higher. So they recommend 2 to 7 days to be done. So Dr. Raj, I will leave you now. I just need to ask you the next question is how do you follow up these patients? I have treated her very well. She's taken the antibiotic from me. How am I going to follow her up for the urine cultures?
Now, once the course is completed, I recheck it by another urine culture test to see whether the infection has been eradicated or not after the interval of 2 weeks, 1 or 2 weeks. And if it shows another infection, which usually happens due to the different organism, then I will prefer to repeat a course of the antibiotic according to the sensitivity. It may be a little longer, or a suppressive therapy to prevent the recurrence for a longer period, maybe one at night throughout the pregnancy, or continuing it 4 weeks, depending upon the other associated high risk factor.
Okay. So that's rightly said. You need to definitely confirm by doing a urine culture after completion of treatment. And in high-risk patients, it's recommended in pregnancy, please repeat it monthly thereafter to be able to see that she doesn't redevelop the infection because it is known to cause preterm labors. So we do not take ABU lightly. Please, in your routine practice at the first antenatal visit, do it a habit of doing urine routine and culture. Pick it up whether she's a high risk or a low risk and accordingly treat because these are the ones who land up with the preterm delivery.
In fact,
So these are
just a minute. They say that you should repeat in every trimester, those who are at the high risk, even if the
Yes.
infection was cured.
Yes, definitely. And so this was a beautiful thing I found that 16 bodies, not all these bodies that I've written on the other side, they have put out all the guidelines in our meta-analysis. As far as finding out the causes, they say guidelines which endorse cervical length as a screening in high-risk women, screening for asymptomatic bacteria to prevent PTB. This is endorsed by all guidelines. Guidelines which are against cervical length screening as universal screening for bacterial vaginosis. But universal screening, yes, everyone has said that if you can, then do it. So let us all take it a point that we are going to ask in the second trimester an anomaly scan for a universal screening by a transvaginal method. Every patient we are going to urine routine and culture at the first antenatal visit, and symptomatic patients we are going to definitely look for the bacterial vaginosis. So now coming to you, Dr. Archana, we have carried out all the recommended tests at 12 weeks. We even went ahead and asked that when she went for an NT&B scan that please ek baar zara cervical length bhi dekh lena, and they were very nice. They did a vaginal scan. They found that the cervical length was 31 millimeters. Today she's 14 weeks. She's had one previous spontaneous preterm birth. Today she's 14 weeks pregnancy. We have done all her previous investigations of bacterial vaginosis as well as urine culture. They're fine. How would you now monitor this pregnancy to prevent preterm birth?
Thank you, Dr. Jyoti. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm sorry. So this patient, I think she's already, as already Dr. Shweta has said, that she's in the high risk zone regards her pregnancy because of her previous preterm delivery and PPRO. So definitely at this stage, there is definitely no need of a cervical insert clutch. So at her antenatal visits, when she's coming to me, I would definitely ask for all the modifiable risk factors which you've already discussed.
Yeah, we have already discussed that. Now she's at 14 weeks. How are you going to take her head to monitor for prevention of
cervical screening is going to be an important factor here. So we are going to monitor her for the cervical length from 16 weeks onwards till about 24 weeks of pregnancy. And definitely she's going to have an ultrasound, maybe subsequently an anomaly scan at 20 weeks, around 18, 20 weeks, level 2. So around that time, we could ask the radiologist to have a look at her cervix and see and reassure her that it is fine and there's no problem.
So it's recommended in such patients who are high risk from 16 weeks, as you rightly said, every 2 weeks to 24 weeks. But anytime we find the length to be between 26 to 29 millimeters, then we make the scan to be done weekly instead of once in 2 weeks because our cutoff is 25 millimeters. So we don't know when she's going to go below that. So then it tends to become a weekly. So that's how we are going to monitor this particular patient. So Dr. Renu, now considering the fact that she has come to you at this time, which progesterone would you like to give? And would you like to actually give it? And if yes, which one? And when would you like to start? She's the one who is preterm. Cervical length is normal at present. And
Yes.
would you like a progesterone?
Yes, because she's a high risk patient. She has a history of preterm vaginal delivery as well as premature rupture of membranes. So definitely progesterone should be given to this patient because we don't want another episode to happen like this and we feel very sorry for it. So definitely vaginal, I usually prefer vaginal progesterone actually because there are reasons why I do it because I think the intramuscular injection is quite painful. And she has to really visit a person every time, every week she has to go and get a hydroxyprogesterone. So I think so preferably will be a vaginal progesterone for her, 200 milligram OD. And regarding even gel can be used, but these are messy. This is what patients do complain of. So I have every reason to use that. I know people do use intramuscular injections from 16 weeks onwards and even guidelines do recommend. But it is a personal choice. I think so. This is much convenient. I can call her rather than calling her every week to the hospital and making a hassle for her. I think so. Vaginal would be a better option.
Okay, that's great. So anyone is of a different opinion apart from vaginal? Anyone would be giving? Dr. Archana, what is your practice? What do you give?
We do give weekly 17 hydroxyprogesterone caproate injections. We do that.
And Dr. Seema, what do you give?
I prefer vaginal progesterone. Easier to follow.
So that difference, both of them are right. Yeah, so both of them are right because one guideline comes from US where vaginal progesterone has not yet got a sanction to be used in preterm, and the other guideline comes from UK where 17 hydroxyprogesterone is not sanctioned. So the recommendation as far as FM guidelines does say 17p 250 milligrams IM starting from 16 weeks up to 36 weeks. They say if you stop it before, that is early at 32 weeks, it's associated with increased risk of preterm birth. So please continue. But till 36, I know patient cries, patient yells, but they get used to it. And in my practice, I too am using 17-hydroxyprogesterone. And this, just for information, this was the only drug which has been approved by the US FDA in 2011 following the mice et al. Trial. And this is the only drug which has been first time approved for the prevention of preterm and for pregnancy in the last 15 years. And that is when I think all the US guidelines have been using 17-hydroxyprogesterone for the prevention. So Dr. Shweta, I'll come over here that yes, we have a lot of controversies with 17-hydroxyprogesterone. So at present,
Come in for a second.
current status.
Can I
What
come
is
in
the
for a
current
second?
status? Yeah, Dr. Vanna.
Here, I just want to add that dydrogesterone is coming as a new player. And as PubMed has said, that progestin supplementation appears to be a promising approach to both preventing initiation of preterm labor and treating it once it's established. So successful pregnancy depends on maternal tolerance of fetal semi-allograft, a protein called PIBF, by inducing Th2 dominant cytokine production, mediates the immunological effects of progesterone. And this is the place where dydrogesterone is the key.
Yeah.
And it is.
I think we have last time
it is entering.
yeah.
It is
Yeah,
entering the field now, and that is the reason why so many companies are coming up.
Yeah, but
Initially,
we
it was
don't
only
have any
one company.
trials. We don't have as
We
yet
don't
any
have any trials. No.
trials, so at
Only
present we
trials
cannot
running
recommend.
RPL.
Yeah, we cannot
no.
recommend it at present. We hope that in future
Yeah.
it comes and all the problems and the to go off.
So I just an introduction. Yeah.
So Dr. Shweta, for you, what do you think is the evidence at present of 17-hydroxyprogesterone? What is the status?
Ma'am, so recently in Lancet, March 2021 only, a very large meta-analysis, the EPIC trial has been published. So this EPIC trial, it included 11,000 women and 16,000 offsprings, and it compared vaginal progesterone, 17-hydroxyprogesterone in ladies which had previous preterm birth. And they found that both of them, both 17-hydroxyprogesterone as well as vaginal progesterone, did equally good. However, for 17-hydroxyprogesterone, if you see it very minutely, the risk ratio crossed the unity line. But then both of them are now approved according to the EPIC trial. Both of them are doing good. If, however, it was analyzed further and ladies without a short cervix were taken into account, then 17-hydroxyprogesterone is not the drug of choice. Then we would like to still continue with our vaginal progesterone. If multiple pregnancies were taken, then it is still not progestin still have no role.
So here, that's very, I think that's really underlines the fact that Dr. Renu is using vaginal, some are using 17-hydroxy. It's a matter of choice. It's a matter of convenience. It's a matter of preference where we discuss it out with the patients. Both are equally good. But what I wanted to share was this latest evidence which says, because I just said that the FDA had approved it in 2011, but they had given an approval based on the mice trial. After that, there was a rider in that after approval, you need to do another confirmatory trial. And they did a prolonged trial, which was released in 2019. And they found in this prolonged trial, more than 1,100 patients had been used, that they did not find any benefit of giving 17. So FDA has withdrawn from the market 17-hydroxyprogesterone. Delivery from 5th October 2020, it has proposed, it has not as yet withdrawn. But then let us see, what do our bodies tell? ACOG 2012 updated October 2019 after the FDA. They say continue to recommend offering 17-hydroxyprogesterone because they feel that the two groups had different type of patients. The patients in the mice trial had high-risk patients, while in the prolonged it was not so high risk. And SFM continues to say endorse use for women with a risk profile similar to mice et al. So at present, despite FDA having withdrawn, all our bodies still say that you can continue using in high-risk patients. So this particular controversy, which I did adjust because, just see how guidelines are made. I have already talked about that US, no vaginal progesterone, Europe and UK, only vaginal, no 7-HP. So the guidelines tend to vary with them. So I think we're I'll just take next two questions and then Dr. Vanna, I'm going to just hand it over. So Dr. Suma, she was started on 17-hydroxyprogesterone, 200 milligrams given weekly. She was started and then they did an anomaly scan at 19 weeks of pregnancy and a cervical length was measured. It was found just 18 millimeters. It has come down to 18 millimeters with a history of previous preterm birth. Now, what are you going to do? She's already on 17-hydroxyprogesterone.
The patient is having previous one preterm birth. And doctor was very wise. Gynecologist has started progesterone for her from very beginning. But still she had cervical length was shortened as 18 weeks. The patient knows very well because the doctor must have explained her, your cervix will be short, you will be going for the circulars. And the patient, this time patient has come to me with the mindset of circulars. And we know that this time recommendation is offering her cervical circulars. I would just put the point because this time circulars is the emergency thing. So many times we have seen the patients are coming to us, we put the case, we go for the investigations, we put the circulars for the next day, patient dilate and abort. So this is the obstetric emergency. So we have to put the patient up for the circulars, take the sample for high vaginal swab, send the routine urine culture if you want, and they send all the sample, but put the circulars on the priority basis. In my experience, I have put the circulars in the patient who is the previous 5 abortion, mid-trimester abortion, and then again she came with the opening of the cervix. I had to put the second circulars over the first circulars. Therefore, I learned not to give up. Maybe the second circulars can help in preventing the preterm labor. One more case I'll say with the Dr. Meenakshi. I have operated the patient September release, and then Dr. Meenakshi has put 1 circulars. Then she had again preterm, put the second circulars. Again, she had a dilatation, and then she has gone for the laparoscopic circulars, and now she is having live baby. This is circulars is the answer, and we should not give up for the patient. Now coming to the progesterone. In the progesterone, if we go with the literature, the people who are giving the 17-hydroxyprogesterone acetate, they can continue up to 36 weeks. And both the progesterone has more or less the same efficacy. But in practice, so many times we add the vaginal progesterone. We explain to the patient that we can continue the 17-hydroxyprogesterone as per recommendations. But if we add the vaginal progesterone, it will not much harmful for you. And so many times I use the vaginal progesterone in addition because lots of studies says that vaginal progesterone really reduce the further shortening of the cervix. Based on that, sometimes I use vaginal progesterone for my patient.
Do you mean to say after cervical cerclage, you're talking of vaginal progesterone after cervical cerclage, or you're talking as an alternate?
No,
or you're talking
not
every
that. The circulars is the answer in this patient.
Okay. So you mean to say sometimes you'd give an 17-hydroxyprogesterone plus a vaginal progesterone?
I add for some time. If I feel I can give more chance, but otherwise circulars is the answer in my opinion.
So any other panelist has a different opinion apart from circulage for this patient? Or everyone would agree?
I just want to make a comment. Why?
Yeah.
Because she had repeated 5 abortions, second trimester. So why the laparoscopic circular, interval circular was not offered to her?
The patient came to us at the 16 weeks, 17 weeks, you can't do.
This was the first time she had come.
Yeah, naturally. I'm just saying so many times you try the circulars, you feel that I can't do anything. Therefore, I'm saying you can go and
right. If she is coming first time, then this is the only offer you can do that.
She was having 2 point. We have applied the more or less.
Otherwise, ideally, it will be an interval circular laparoscopically for her.
Ma'am, so many times the patient doesn't land up us.
Yeah,
No, that's fine. I think that's what Dr. Raj wants to say is, yeah, this time you were stuck. You had to do a cervical. But such a particular patient, yeah.
International patients, so many times they come, they send all the queries.
You are very lucky she continued, but maybe next time in case she had again aborted, next time would have done an abdominal interval circular, then taken her up for the next time. So that is where, so yes, of course, in this particular patient, yeah.
One thing more.
Someone.
Should we give both progesterone simultaneously, vaginally and injectable?
No, it's recommended is only 117-hydroxyprogesterone, monitor by cervical length.
Sometimes I give for short time, vaginal also for my patient.
So that's her personal experience, but as far as the guidelines come,
Recommendations is
Anyone else is
continue with
using
17 hydroxy.
Dr. Jyoti, can I say something here?
yeah, please.
See,
Sangeeta,
if a woman has had 5 abortions and never had a previous cerclage, I don't think it becomes an indication to directly take her up for a transabdominal cerclage. For a transabdominal cerclage, there are only 2 clear-cut indications. One, either a previous vaginal cerclage has failed, despite a vaginal cerclage, she delivered preterm, or if her cervix is so short, it is technically not possible to give a vaginal cerclage. Otherwise, first line for previous 5 abortions, I don't think that is an indication to give a transabdominal cerclage straight away. Unless, so these are the 2 indications. In this case also, you would first try a vaginal cerclage for the patient.
Yeah, that's very rightfully said, Dr. Sangeeta, that I think we should be very clear. At this time when she had come, yes, it was a vaginal that we were talking about. So moving ahead to this particular one, and that's a question I want Dr. Seema. It's a very controversial question. And just to ask you, what do you think? Would you advise her a total bed rest? Or would you tell her that, yes, bed rest is very important? So what is the evidence and what is your practice?
Dr. Jyoti, the role of bed rest is very controversial. Initially, we used to prescribe bed rest to almost all the patients with threatened. But over the years, we have seen that the role of bed rest is not so much. We don't see much improvement. Plus, we have the added disadvantages of a prolonged bed rest leading to some venous thrombosis. So absolute bed rest, I don't think is advisable. But yes, she should limit her physical activity, avoid intercourse, and all those strenuous exercises, which may lead to a preterm delivery.
So anyone would differ from this particular point of view? Is anyone would like to say anything? Because I would just like to say the Cochrane study of this quite latest in 2015. So previous one that they had come 2030, they had said that bed rest, not enough evidence. But now the words have changed a little. It says no evidence to support or refute bed rest in preventing preterm birth. But yes, they say the disadvantages are much higher than the advantages. So they say you really need to think about bed rest. So would anyone like to make a comment so that before we move to the next question? Or everyone's okay with this?
The patient will be resting whatever you give the advice.
Yes,
Yeah, and that's different.
right.
You are not to write absolute bed rest. You are not to write that on the prescription. That's up to the patient if she does it or not. Entirely. And you need to tell that if you're- and if she is on the bed rest, please keep doing your exercise. Please moving others. You'll land up with DVT, which is going to be quite bad for the
Yes, that's more important.
So, Dr. Archana, this is, I think, the girl has had cervical cerclage. She was very good. She again comes to us repeatedly with pain abdomen. Every few, because she's so scared, she keeps coming to me again and again that I have pain abdomen. So do you think there's any role of doing a CL measurements in such patients after we have done a cervical cerclage?
I think after putting a cervical cerclage, CL measurement wouldn't do much here because I think if the cervical stitch has been put in place rightly, then I don't think we have to just reassure her that she is, anyway, I mean, I think she's more anxious because of her previous history. So we just reassure her and tell her that everything is fine. And, I think that is what is required.
That's very important. Unless and until she comes to us with severe pain, like Dr. Suman's pain, she didn't come and she had needed another cerclage. But generally, they advise that it goes from the 2016 guidelines. And I think it's insufficient data to suggest a clinical benefit of routine post-cervical, post-cerclage CL measurement or surveillance. But yes, if the patient is in trouble, she's got severe pain, and you feel it's imminent delivery, then please go ahead and do a cerclage. So, Dr. Raj, this is one for you that she's now 33 weeks. She has come with contractions, 1 in every 15 minutes. How would you predict her chances of PTB? Dr. Meenakshi has covered it so very precisely.
Yeah,
and
she has
exactly
already covered. So it is the cervical length assessment and cervical dilatation, which is again very important to predict her chances of the preterm birth. And the more the cervical dilatation and the effacement, she is more at the risk of the preterm birth. And now there are other significant biomarkers like the fetal fibronectin. If it is present, if it is positive, then it will increase her chances of the preterm birth. But the negative predictive value of the fetal fibronectin is more significant that if it is negative, we can reassure you are not going into the preterm labor for at least 1 or 2 weeks. The second predictor, which are again more practically used and are available, is the phosphorylated insulin-like growth factor binding protein 1, and the another one is the placental alpha microglobulin 1, which if they are present, they will make her whether she is at risk for going into the preterm birth or not. The other biochemical marker like the CRP, interleukin 6 and 8, and the tumor necrosis factor, I don't think they are practically being so used and useful in predicting the preterm labor. If these factors are negative, then we can reassure and counsel her very well that she is going to prolong her pregnancy.
Yeah, Dr. Raj very rightly said, but only one thing that we need to highlight, both things have to be done together, cervical length plus
Yes,
the bio.
both has to go parallel.
Done, yes. Exclusively, either of them, they don't have much of a predictability. So if you really look at the test that is available, the only one test is available in India, and that is called the one, that's the third one, it's a long name. That is PHL GH5P1. It's like a urine, it's a dipstick. So you just take a swab, you dip into it, within 5 minutes, you have a result. Very high negative predictive value, but again, the positive predictive value is less. The PAM-G1, that's the PATSURE, has got a very high positive predictive value. Although it's not available in India at present, but if this is the only test which has got, apart from a high negative predictive value, it also has a very high positive predictive value. And if you look at the FICO recommendations, it says if your cervical length is less than 15 or more than 30, don't use any biomarkers. Because less than 15 anyway is going to go in labor, more than 30, nothing's going to happen to her. It's only when it is in between this particular range, you can use a biomarkers, and the test that they recommend is the one with a high positive predictive value, and that is the PAM-G1 is a test that is recommended. We hope it comes to India fast. The other test is already available. We can use that to predict the preterm birth. So we have many newer markers, of which I felt ferritin was a very interesting one. They find that if the ferritin is more than 31 nanogram per meter, it can be suggestive that this patient has a higher risk of preterm birth. So I now hand it over to Dr. Vandana. I'm sorry, Dr. Vandana, I took a longer time. So you're going to continue with this one itself?
Doesn't matter. We are just we are getting indications that we have to wind it up fast.
Yes.
So it will be a rapid fire round, and it's just a revision of what Dr. Jyoti and Dr. Meenakshi have done a wonderful job. So this is a rapid fire round, Dr. Seema. This is a third Gravida Para 1 with previous 2 preterm deliveries at 28 to 34 weeks. So what are you going to do? What are your options? We have already done it very fast.
The screen has for the cervical length.
Very good. Yeah.
She is, this pregnancy is a very precious pregnancy. She's already had 2 previous preterm deliveries. I would offer her a cervical circlet. I would offer along with a progesterone also, so that she carries on till.
Irrespective of cervical length, you will go in for circlage?
Personally speaking,
Irrespective.
practically speaking, I
Not
would
irrespective.
because of
Okay.
the 2 previous.
Your
because of
choice.
the 2
Other people, other panelists, what would they say?
As per
What about
recommendation,
this?
go for vaginal progesterone first. This
So Dr. Suman, you would prefer vaginal progesterones, okay?
because in your
Recommendation
choice,
is 75%.
measurement is not, because she is already at 20. Okay, weeks you have not written. Vaginal progesterone will start, then go for the cervical. But in the choice, I will give the B.
You'll give B, vaginal
I will
progesterones.
definitely go for a circulage. For this patient,
Because there is not written how many gestations she is.
She is less than 14 because we have asked cervical at 14 weeks, so she's less than 14.
we definitely will go for a circulage. There is no.
Even I would go for a circulage. Even I would go for a circulage.
Irrespective of the cervical length.
Yes, yes.
Because she's previous to preterm delivery.
Two previous preterm deliveries a high risk factor in itself.
Yes.
She isn't the high risk
Yeah.
factor.
So these are the indications. We have a physical examination, second trimester pregnancy losses related to painless cervical dilatation and no history of labor or abruption, or a previous second trimester circlage for painless cervical dilatation. So ultrasound of cervical length indicating 25 mm, that was a transvaginal, with previous spontaneous preterm birth at 34 and a singleton, we can give a circlage. Next.
The consensus for this patient of everyone is that we will go in for a cervical elective cerclage. Is that okay with everyone?
And then continue
At
with the
16.
injectable progesterone.
Yes.
Or not?
Yeah, definitely from 16 hydroxyprogesterone, 17
Yes.
from 16
Yes.
weeks that we are going to start.
Yeah.
She candidate where we can put a cervical encerclage, but yes, if wants a vaginal progesterone, it's up to you. It's nothing is very known that yes or no, but yes, she's a good candidate for a elective cervical encerclage. So we're coming to the next question, Dr. Vandana.
This is again a patient is for elective cervical cerclage. What period of gestation is ideal for it, Dr. Renu?
16 weeks.
16 weeks, right? Because
Yeah.
yeah. And would you like to do a HVS before that?
Yes, we routinely do. Before planning the cerclage, we do a high vaginal swab. We see there is no infection or discharge below that. We do send it.
Yeah, ideally it should be done at the time of putting it and at the time of removing as well. And what is your preference, Merceline or Proline?
We use silk. We are
You
using
use silk.
silk. A long time back, since my senior residency, I've seen silk being put and we are doing that same only and it works.
Okay. See, basically the evidence is about the monofilament versus the
Braided, mono-braided, and yeah.
filament, braided ones.
But
So
I myself have put many and I
there's
no
what cause
problem
lot of
with that.
vaginal infection. Would you continue with vaginal progesterones after that?
Yes, definitely. Because I just don't want that she should go into preterm. So I will be using the vaginal progesterone for this patient as well.
As well, you're already using 17 OHP. We're using vaginal as well.
I'm not for 17 hydroxyprogesterone. I'm for vaginal progesterone.
She's a candidate for vaginal. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so the choice is equally divided. We can, and bed rest for how long? Again, the same indications, huh?
Though the guidelines don't recommend bed rest, but definitely I will tell the patient to limit her physical activities, prevent any infection, maybe any fever, have plenty of fluids. She should not have any UTI. So that counseling is very important to the patient. That she should not have anything from outside, no diarrhea, no. These all things she should take care of herself. That's the only thing which I always tell to the patient.
Next.
So anyone for Merceline tape? Anyone has experience with Merceline tape?
Yeah,
Dr. Jyoti, I've used a Merceline tape, but then it is not very cost effective. It is, not everybody can afford it. So,
it is cumbersome also.
no, it's not
I
that
have
cumbersome, ma'am.
2 or 3. No, it is, to me it was.
Okay. The advantage of a Merceline tape, it has got needles on both the ends. So it's very easy to throw both the ends and tie it. And the only thing, it's a little thick. And second, it's costly. It is costly. So, but
Yeah, third, it is
used to
braided.
whichever method, I think both of them work equally well. It's one's own experience and one's own practice that one tends to use the particular tape. Yeah.
So next. So we have done anomaly scan is primary gravida with a twin pregnancy. This is for Dr. Raj. And of course, you do not want to have her a preterm delivery. And your preventive options would be? Dr. Raj?
Cervical cerclage has no role because the routine use of vaginal progesterone or injectable, the counseling has to be done with the patient and according to her choice. Either of it I will be giving for the prevention of the twin pregnancy going into the preterm, and along with that I'll be monitoring with the cervical length with the second trimester anomaly scan and further also. And modifiable, all the risk factors has to be prevented. She has to be taken care, whatever already has been explained. Because twin pregnancy as such has a little increased risk for the preterm birth.
Yeah. And vaginal progesterone or injectable?
The
Would you
choice
use?
has been given. It is the choice of the patient. Vaginal progesterone, in this case, I'll be preferring rather than giving the injectable, because then she has to be going weekly and then they are painful, whatever has already been told.
But Dr. Raj, she doesn't have any history of previous spontaneous preterm births. She's just a spontaneous multiple pregnancy. So would you like to give her progesterone?
In the twin, if there are any persistent pain and all these,
But as a routine, if she comes to you at 14 weeks or 16 weeks, would you like to do it?
Or I will monitor with the cervical length, and I will try to prevent these modifiable factors to take care of those.
Dr. Archana, because you deal with IVF, I think, suppose she was an IVF patient, a with twin pregnancy, would you like to put a stitch?
Should I tell practical thing or what I do, or should I tell what the
No,
recommendation
what is right? What is right?
So what is right
What
is they
is-
don't
it's a
recommend the
forum
cervical circulage
It's
in
a
all
forum where we
pregnancies
need to
as well.
send very clear messages.
Yeah, no recommendation of a cervical and cerculage as a routine in twin pregnancy.
And Dr. Jyoti, can I say something here?
Yeah, please. Yes, Dr. Singh.
Yeah, even progesterones have no role in multiple pregnancies. In fact, we have no strategy of preventing preterm and multiple pregnancies so far, which are evidence-based. As a matter of personal choice, one may do anything.
No, there is
Whether
a,
it's cerclage or it is progesterones, it doesn't help you to, there's no evidence to
Previous slide.
support.
डॉक्टर ज्योति उसमें vaginal का रोल था previous
नहीं,
slide.
इसमें ये था ना, yeah, next slide. With a short cervix, if the cervix is short.
Yeah, vaginal progesterone reduced preterm births to less than 33 in twin pregnancy with a short cervix. So no cerclage, only vaginal progesterone. Otherwise, unselected pregnancies, no benefit.
Is very important for the cervical.
Monitoring is important. Yeah, cerclage, even then cerclage is not being given.
And till so far, I've never used cerclage in twin
pregnancy. But vaginal progesterone can be tried. So,
So it's very clear that we continue with the universal
usually is
between 60 weeks. So, Dr. कौन बोल रहा है भाई? Please, someone mute. So, cerclage is not recommended for multiple pregnancies. If a woman with prior spontaneous and present multiple gestation, she has twin pregnancy with previous, then 17-hydroxyprogesterone. Insufficient evidence to recommend use of progesterones outside clinical trials in a case of a multiple pregnancy. So, for multiple, Dr. Vandana, you would agree that cervical health screening, universal screening at the anomaly scan, based on that, we decide whether progesterone, 17-hydroxyprogesterone to be given. Dr. Poonam Singh, I think there's some disturbance at your end. Can you just mute? Dr. Poonam Singh, can you mute, please? I think she's not interested. So, Dr. Vanna, are you there?
Right. Let's go to the next.
I think Dr. Vandana Gupta has gone off, so I'll take over at this particular one. So, Dr. Suman, this is for you. She's had a unicornuate uterus, or maybe we take a history and we find that she's had a leap done. Now she has conceived spontaneously. So, what
Jyoti,
steps would you take?
Hello.
Yeah, please. You're back, Dr. Vandana.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you, Dr. Vandana.
Yeah. Next. Let's go on to the next.
No,
So
this
the
case
consensus
number
seems
4.
to be we just monitored and we can put her on vaginal progesterone. Right. Next case.
I've already put it. It's number 4. It's on the screen.
4 is not coming on the screen. 4
It is
not coming
on the screen. It's on the screen.
So my screen is not refreshing. Okay, you read. Yeah, I got it. It's a case of unicornuate uterus or a previous leap who has spontaneously conceived. So what steps would you undertake to prevent preterm birth? Dr. Suman.
Basically, the patient is having
Suman?
sleep or cervical trauma, and or the
Right.
uterus. Again, it may lead to preterm labor. So I will go with C. Monitor with the cervical length from 16 weeks pregnancy, and then if there's cervical dilatation, funneling, or the cervical sorting will occur, I will go for rescue stage.
Rescue stage. And routine use of vaginal progesterone in such cases along with
I
stitch.
don't give a routine use of the vaginal progesterone.
So the evidence says there's insufficient evidence to support additional screening for women with a previous electrosurgical procedure or a cold knife cone for cervical dysplasia. The increased risk of spontaneous PTB in this population appears to be related to the history of dysplasia, cervical dysplasia, and not the treatment. So low risk treatment for cervical dysplasia or have a history of dysplasia do not require.
I think Dr. Vanda, your net is playing games today. We cannot hear you very well. Vanda, we can't hear you.
No
Your
voice
net-
at all.
Dr. Vanda ma'am's net is not working properly.
Okay, so what the
Take over,
display?
huh?
So what the dysplasia actually is, so at present, what I think personally, and maybe the evidence which clearly says that is that we can take this patient up for cervical monitoring. There's no rule of putting an elective cerclage in these patients. So you just do a cervical length monitoring. Anytime you find that the length becomes less than 24 millimeter, you have a choice of vaginal progesterone or cervical cerclage, but they do need this one. So are you back, Dr. Vandana?
Am I audible? Then I'm back.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
32.
you're
This is
audible
another
now.
case, 32 weeks pregnancy with PPROM and Actin-Prom, which is a very sensitive test, is positive. So you definitely wish to prolong a pregnancy at least up to 34 weeks. What are your options, Dr. Shweta? Injectable, oral, or tocolysis?
It can be more than one.
Yes, obviously. Dr. Shweta, you're there? Dr. Raj, aap bata do.
I will get her admitted for the observation. And
Right.
tocolysis can be a short time period, not more than 48 hours for the neuroprotections and for the steroid coverage.
Right.
And then we will just wait and watch and observe her and let her continue till 34 weeks. I won't give her
Yeah.
progesterone or oral.
Dr. Shweta is there. Why? What about oral or injectable progesterones, Dr. Shweta?
No role of progestogens at this stage of gestation. Admit, observe, and give her steroid cover. That is all that needs to be done. She's already 32 weeks, so there is no role of match cycle.
And what about tocolysis?
Of course.
Tocolysis is also
In
not.
summary, there is insufficient
There is insufficient evidence right now.
sufficient evidence. Right, to effect the of progesterone in the woman with PPROM. In a woman who has been receiving 17 OHP for prior spontaneous preterm birth, in absence of evidence to the contrary, it is reasonable to continue 17 OHP once membranes have ruptured. So we continue with 17 OHP.
So coming to the last,
What about tocolysis?
that is a part. It's only related to progesterones. Of course, you are going to educate the patient. Of course, you're going to give it tocolysis. Of course, you're going to give her antenatal steroids. It is a question of should we give her a 17 hydroxyprogesterone? Should we give her a vaginal progesterone? The question is that. So they say there's insufficient evidence, but if she's already on it, then continue it. If she's already on that particular drug.
The last case, it's a 30 weeks pregnancy, admitted in preterm labor. You have managed her well, and she's for discharge today. So, Dr. Ashna, what would be your advice for long-term tocolysis, injectable progesterone?
I would go with C, vaginal progestogens. Vaginal
No
progestogens.
long-term,
No
no
long-term.
long-term
Nothing, no.
tocolysis. They are, yeah.
Maybe an injectable
Contrary.
progesterone for another 4 to 5 weeks, maybe, but vaginal progesterone definitely.
So can we ask the other
Dennis
Dr.
as
Rain,
well.
discharge your patients once we have controlled well and they've been given. So what do you send them on Wadlon, or do you send them on nifedipine or progesterone injectables?
No, Dr. Jyoti, we don't give any duodlone on discharge, nor we give nifedipine. That is only when she's an active, maybe in that early labor and we have to cover the steroid cover. That is only when we give that nifedipine for 48 hours until the steroid cover. If we have to discharge, we discharge on vaginal progesterone. So just we can, so that she can just go somewhere between 34 to 36 weeks. We want to prolong that pregnancy till then. So that's
So Dr. Suman, do you have any difference of opinion, Dr. Suman, for you?
There is no difference. of
Sangeeta,
opinion.
your comments? Dr. Sangeeta, your comments on it?
I agree with Dr. Renu that we'll continue her on vaginal progesterones.
Okay. So the role of progesterone's primary trocholysis, women, 57 women. So yeah. So in summary, there is correctly insufficient evidence to recommend progesterones for primary, adjunctive or maintenance trocholysis. So this is the evidence, but vaginal progesterone 400 milligram per day until delivery was associated with longer latency until delivery. And 17-OHP, there was seen to be a significant reduction in the incidence of preterm birth below 37 weeks, but not below 35 weeks, and the risk of cervical shortening compared to no such treatment. So all the treatments are equally effective. So it is to the personal choice, whatever you feel you can give, but tocolytic agents are not used. It is only a choice between 17-OHP and vaginal progesterone. And we have already covered the patient with maybe steroids. And this is a new cervical pessary, Arabin. A trial evaluated the use of pessary and found that rate of delivery before 34 weeks was significantly lower in women with pessary and those without. As of December 2016, greater than 20 open studies examining cervical pessary either alone or in combination with other treatments has been done. At this time, there is inconclusive evidence that cervical pessary use, including Arabin pessary, decreases the rate of preterm birth or improves maternal or fetal outcomes. With further studies, cervical pessary may be promising non-invasive additional intervention to prevent preterm birth in women with a shortened cervix.
It's not available in India at present, but a lot of clinical trials are going on, and I hope in near future have this one coming up.
It was there with Apollo for a trial only. They were having Dr. Anita Kaul had it for a trial. So these are the summary. A singleton pregnancy.
The trial was done in multiple pregnancy, twin patients, not singleton.
Okay. What is singleton? Okay. So the clinical scenario, singleton pregnancy, spontaneous preterm singleton, then vaginal progesterone or OFP can be given with both as coming as 2C evidence. Mid-trimester cervical length less than 25 millimeters and no previous spontaneous, then vaginal progesterone. So 17 HP is only when we have a previous history. And multiple pregnancy, no progesterone, twin pregnancy, vaginal progesterone can be given. And 17 OHP could be another plus minus. Twin pregnancy with short cervix, another vaginal progesterone. PPROM, fetal fibronectin plus preterm labor or arrested after an episode, vaginal progesterone or 17 OHP, the evidence says there is no benefit. And after cerclage, the role of vaginal progesterone or 17 OHP is very unclear. So these are the last words as the evidence what is say. And hope is not dead. It is just larger than our imagination. Its purpose extended far beyond our comprehension. So this leaves us to an open state. Thanks.